The clang of the cell door was the rhythm of Elias Thorne's life. But even in this concrete tomb, a sliver of green, a tiny smuggled sprout in a hidden crack, offered a silent, vibrant rebellion against the sterile, gray existence. In the dusty prison library, a haven of forgotten knowledge, Elias found his true confinement. His fingers, usually stained with penitentiary grime, traced intricate molecular diagrams in ancient botanical texts, oblivious to the muted chaos of shuffling feet and whispered complaints around him. He absorbed the complex chemical structures, the subtle interactions of alkaloids and glycosides, as if deciphering a secret language only he understood. From his perch in the raised observation booth, a guard's gaze lingered, a mix of suspicion and the vague, unsettling curiosity one reserved for a man who found solace in the deadliest secrets of nature. The desolate prison yard, a concrete expanse baked under a indifferent afternoon sun, was another canvas for Elias's observational acuity. While other inmates lifted weights or walked in aimless circles, Elias stood by the perimeter fence, his sharp eyes scanning. He noted the subtle shifts in the guards, posture, the unspoken hierarchies between gangs, but mostly he observed the tenacious weeds pushing through cracked asphalt, charting their improbable survival. Warden Hayes, a man carved from granite and rules, strode past, his uniform crisp in the harsh light. His gaze, brief and stern, locked with Elias's for a fraction of a second. A silent acknowledgement of the prisoner who saw too much, understood too keenly, yet remained an enigma. "Keep it moving, Miller!" Hayes barked at a loitering inmate, his voice a low, firm rumble. Back in his cell, as the dim evening light filtered through the bars, a sense of claustrophobia pressed in. Elias pulled out a stub of pencil and began to sketch. Not the rough prison walls, but a complex molecular structure, a ghost from another life. His hand moved with an innate precision, each line a memory. A fleeting image, sharp and cold, flashed in his mind. A sterile lab, a corporate rival's sneer, and the silent, shimmering liquid in a vial. More Viridian. The name, unbidden, screamed in his mind, and with it, the profound, sickening regret that had been his constant companion for years. He crumpled the drawing, the paper a flimsy shroud for a past he desperately tried to bury. The call to an unscheduled visit was a rare, jarring interruption to Elias's monotonous routine. His escort led him down a sterile corridor to a brightly lit visitation room, where Warden Hayes stood beside a woman unlike anyone Elias had seen in years. She was distinguished, impeccably dressed, her eyes a startling blue against a backdrop of professional urgency. "Mr. Thorne," Warden Hayes began, his voice devoid of its usual gruffness. The woman stepped forward, a flicker of awkwardness crossing her face before resolve hardened her features. "Elias Thorne," she corrected, her voice clear and direct. "My name is Dr. Aris Thorne, and despite everything, I believe you are the only man in the world who can help us. A silent killer sweeping the globe, and only one man holds the key." Dr. Aris Thorne leaned forward, her composure cracking under the weight of her words. "We're facing a global pandemic, Mr. Thorne. A neurotoxin, which we've codenamed Acheron. It's insidious, rapidly spreading, and utterly untreatable by any conventional means." Her voice, usually calm and authoritative, now carried an edge of desperation. On the table, a holographic projection shimmered into existence. Complex brain scans, neural pathways dissolving into static. Elias watched it all with a detached, almost academic interest, though a subtle flicker in his eyes betrayed a deeper, analytical engagement. It attacks the central nervous system, causing irreversible damage within days, complete neurological collapse. And its origin, she paused, her gaze meeting his, is botanical, which makes it uniquely resistant to all our synthetic antidotes. It mimics a natural process, a parasitic mimicry that our current medicine simply cannot decipher. The grim details washed over Elias, but his mind was already dissecting, categorizing, cataloging. Acheron. A name chosen for a reason. He knew about names. The world's most dangerous mind, now its only hope. Elias let out a soft, sardonic chuckle, a sound like dry leaves rustling. And you, a world-renowned medical researcher, have come to a man serving a life sentence for poisoning a corporate rival? He leaned back, a faint, cynical smile playing on his lips. Forgive me, doctor, but the irony is almost poetic. Or perhaps you're simply out of options? Dr. Thorne met his gaze, her blue eyes pleading. We are, Mr. Thorne, desperately. Our top toxicologists, our best chemists, they're all stumped, but they don't possess your unique understanding of botanical toxicology, your unparalleled knowledge of obscure plant compounds and their interactions. It's not just about what you know, but how you know it. Warden Hayes, who had been standing stiffly by the door, cleared his throat. Dr. Thorne, with all due respect, the notion of involving an inmate, particularly Mr. Thorne, in a matter of global security, is preposterous. Our security protocols alone make this an absurdity. Elias merely raised an eyebrow, his smile unwavering. Absurdity. He was quite familiar with the concept. His past crime holds the key to the world's future. Dr. Thorne ignored the warden, her focus fixed on Elias. We've studied your case, Mr. Thorne. The sophistication of Viridian, its elegant, almost undetectable method of action, the way it targeted specific neural receptors, leaving no trace of synthetic origin. The name hung in the air, thick and heavy, like the unspoken history it carried. Elias felt a jolt, a phantom ache in his chest. Viridian. The ghost of his greatest mistake. He flinched, almost imperceptibly, his cynical smile vanishing. Viridian has nothing to do with this, he said, his voice sharper than intended. My work was precise. Acheron is a different beast. But his hesitation, the way his eyes flickered, betrayed him. A fleeting, almost subliminal image flashed through his mind. A polished corporate boardroom, a glass of water, a single, decisive drop. Dr. Thorne pressed on. The complexity, Mr. Thorne. The botanical complexity. It's why we're here. Because if anyone can understand the silent language of Acheron, it's the man who once mastered the language of Viridian. A prison becomes the unlikely frontier of medical science. Later that day, in the sterile confines of Warden Hayes' office, the air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and reluctant compromise. I won't pretend to like this, Dr. Thorne, the warden stated, tapping a pen rhythmically on a thick rulebook. But the pressure from above is considerable. We will agree to your proposal, but under the most stringent conditions imaginable. He outlined them with grim precision. A secure, isolated laboratory would be constructed within the prison walls, under constant 24/7 surveillance. Every chemical, every piece of equipment, every interaction would be monitored. Elias would be shackled, even within the lab, his movements restricted, his contact minimal. He is still a dangerous man, Doctor, and this facility is maximum security. We will not jeopardize that for any reason. Dr. Thorne nodded, her face etched with exhaustion but also a desperate determination. Understood, Warden. We agree to all terms, whatever it takes. She knew the unprecedented nature of the request, the absurdity of it all. But what choice did they have? Redemption or a deeper trap? The choice of a lifetime. Deep into the night, Elias Thorne paced the cramped confines of his cell, a restless shadow against the faint glow of the security light. Dr. Thorne's words echoed in his mind, a relentless drumbeat. Acheron, untreatable botanical origin. You're the only one. He stopped by the bars, gripping them until his knuckles turned white. The irony tasted like ash. A poisoner, now tasked with creating an antidote. Was this a cruel twist of fate? A deeper trap laid by a universe that delighted in his torment? Or was it something else? A chance, a flicker, barely discernible at first, ignited within him. Not of freedom, not of escape, but of purpose. A chance to use the very knowledge that had condemned him, not for destruction, but for salvation. A chance for something beyond the suffocating despair of his gray existence. His hands clenched, then slowly unclenched. The decision, terrifying and exhilarating, began to solidify. The stale air of the visitation room felt charged, heavy with unspoken questions. Elias Thorne sat opposite Dr. Aris Thorne and Warden Hayes, his gaze steady, analytical, devoid of the desperation one might expect from a man offered a lifeline. He had spent a night wrestling with the devil of his past and the angel of a possible future, and the struggle had left him with a sharpened resolve. "I'll help," Elias stated, his voice a low, measured baritone. "But not on your terms, Doctor. On mine." Dr. Thorne leaned forward, a flicker of relief warring with caution in her eyes. "What are your terms, Mr. Thorne?" "I require direct access to unadulterated samples of Acheron, not filtered data, not sanitized reports, the raw material. And I need a dedicated botanical research facility within these walls, a place where I can cultivate and study specific plant species. Fresh samples, Doctor, even if they must be grown under your meticulous supervision." Warden Hayes let out a slow, exasperated sigh, his face a mask of weary disapproval. "Mr. Thorne, this is a maximum security prison, not a botanical garden." "It's a chance to save lives, Warden," Elias countered, his gaze unwavering. "And my methods are not conventional. They require a direct, tactile relationship with the source material." Dr. Thorne hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed. We'll make it happen." She understood. Elias wasn't just a scientist, he was an artist, and his canvas required living specimens. Later that day, the quiet hum of the prison was shattered by the clang of steel and the buzz of power tools. A repurposed storage room, long forgotten in a rarely used wing, became a hive of activity. Construction crews, overseen by grim-faced security officers, worked with a furious, almost surreal efficiency. Walls were reinforced, sterile flooring laid, and a complex ventilation system installed. Crates arrived, bearing advanced scientific equipment that gleamed under the temporary lights, microscopes capable of molecular dissection, chromatographs, spectrometers. Each piece, a stark, gleaming testament to the world Elias had left behind, now found an unlikely home within the austere gray walls. Warden Hayes stalked the perimeter, his face a blend of suspicion and a dawning, reluctant awe at the sheer scale of this unprecedented project. This wasn't just a lab, it was a fortress of science, built to contain a man, and, perhaps, to unleash his genius. The next morning, Elias Thorne, escorted by a quartet of silent guards, stepped into his new domain. The prison lab was stark but functional, smelling faintly of sterile cleansers and fresh paint. He surveyed the gleaming equipment, his eyes missing nothing, a critical intelligence at play. Dr. Thorne stood waiting, a small stack of files in her hand, trying to project an air of professional calm that didn't quite reach her strained eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," she began, gesturing to a sleek, transparent display. "My team has compiled a preliminary analysis of Acheron's primary vectors and molecular structure. We believe its toxicity stems from a unique glycoside bond, highly resistant to conventional enzymatic degradation." Elias merely nodded, walking past the display, his gaze fixed on a complex piece of analytical machinery. "Your team relies too heavily on synthesis and predictive modeling, Doctor. You've overlooked the ecological context. The glycoside bond is only part of the story. Its stability, its very nature, is dictated by its botanical origin. Tell me, what was the soil pH of the initial sample? The average humidity? The presence of symbiotic fungi?" Dr. Thorne blinked, momentarily flustered. "Those details, they weren't prioritized. We focused on the chemistry." "And you missed the forest for the trees," Elias stated, a ghost of a sardonic smile playing on his lips. "The poison has a signature beyond its molecular weight. It has a story. And you need to learn to read it." Dr. Thorne, though initially bristling, could not deny the incisiveness of Elias's observations. She presented vials containing concentrated Acheron, its viscous liquid swirling ominously. "This is Acheron, Mr. Thorne. Its molecular architecture is elegant, frighteningly so. It targets the synaptic clefts, mimicking acetylcholine but binding irreversibly, leading to rapid systemic neural collapse. Our synthesized antagonists fail because the toxin's tertiary structure undergoes an adaptive conformational change upon binding. It simply sheds the antidote." Elias picked up a vial, holding it to the light, his gaze distant, almost meditative. He didn't need the complex readouts. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, pointing to a holographic projection of Acheron's structure. "It's not just the conformational change. It's the residual, botanical imprint. See this subtle asymmetry here? He traced a minute detail on the projection. "Your models identify it as a structural anomaly, a flaw. But it's a fingerprint. A trace element, likely a metabolic byproduct of the specific host plant. This isn't a flaw. It's a lock. And the key won't be a synthetic antagonist, but a botanical counteragent that exploits this very anomaly, a natural competitor for the binding site, one that disarms the toxin before it can adapt." A beat of stunned silence, then a flicker of grudging respect, almost awe, passed across Dr. Thorne's face. He wasn't just seeing molecules, he was seeing an entire ecosystem embedded in a poison. In the late afternoon, Elias Thorne found a peculiar kind of peace. He was escorted to a newly erected, secure greenhouse, a bubble of vibrant green against the monotonous gray of the prison. The air was warm, humid, and alive with the scent of damp earth and growing things. Rows of specific plant species he had requested, some common, others rare and exotic, thrived under specialized lights. Elias walked among them, his hands, once instruments of destruction, now moved with a surprising tenderness. He gently touched a broad leaf, inhaled the subtle fragrance of a flowering vine. "This one," he murmured, his voice soft, almost poetic, "a relative of the nightshade. Its alkaloids, when isolated, are potent cardiac depressants, but its root system, a powerful chelator. It draws heavy metals from the soil, purifying it." Dr. Thorne observed him, a silent sentinel. She saw a profound connection, an almost reverent understanding that went far beyond mere scientific knowledge. It was an art, a language Elias spoke with the natural world, a language her sterile labs had long forgotten. She was beginning to understand that Elias Thorne wasn't just a poisoner. He was a master, a conductor of life and death, and in this unlikely garden, he was finally home. Old magic versus new science. Can an ancient remedy save a modern world? Days had blurred into a monotonous rhythm of sterile surfaces and complex molecular diagrams. The prison lab, once a mere storage room, now pulsed with a quiet, desperate energy. Elias Thorne, his uniform replaced by a prison-issued lab coat, stood before a holographic display, a faded botanical illustration projected beside a modern molecular model. "The Solananum mortiferum *", he stated, his voice calm, almost meditative. "Ancient texts describe its sap as a counteragent for poisons of the nightshade family. Acheron exhibits similar binding affinities." Dr. Aris Thorne, her brow furrowed, scoffed gently. "Elias, we're talking about a neurotoxin that defies all known synthetic compounds. You're suggesting a folk remedy? An obscure plant extract from a 17th century herbalist's journal? It's anecdotal, unscientific." She gestured to a complex chemical structure on her own tablet. "My team is synthesizing novel peptides. That's where the solution lies." Elias turned, a flicker of something akin to pity in his eyes. He tapped the old diagram. "Science," Dr. Thorne, "often rediscovers the wisdom of forgotten knowledge. The active compounds in Asterix digitalis purpurea * were known for centuries before we understood their cardiac glycosides. The hexamonum has a lineage of potency, described in texts that predate modern chemistry. Your peptides are a shot in the dark. This," he pointed back to the plant, "is a calculated risk based on centuries of observation. Are you so certain of your modern methods that you would dismiss every other path? The impossible happens. The prisoner was right." Despite her deep-seated skepticism, the desperation gnawed at Dr. Thorne. Elias's challenge had struck a nerve. What if? What if the conventional path was indeed a dead end? With a sigh that spoke of professional pride warring with scientific curiosity, she instructed her automated system to synthesize a crude extract from the Solanum mortiferum * samples Elias had cultivated in the small prison greenhouse. Hours later, the lab screens flickered to life. Dr. Thorne watched, her posture rigid, as the preliminary assays ran. The initial results flashed across the monitor, then again. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her. "Impossible," she whispered, her eyes widening. The botanical extract showed a marginal, yet undeniably positive inhibitory effect on Acheron's binding sites. It wasn't a cure, not yet, but it was something. It was more than any of her advanced synthetics had achieved. Elias, leaning against a sterile counter, observed her reaction, a faint, knowing smirk touched his lips. He hadn't needed to say a word. The data spoke for itself, a quiet vindication of his unconventional wisdom, watching a poisoner save the world one step at a time. From the observation room overlooking the lab, Warden Hayes watched the two scientists. He rarely saw Elias so animated, so utterly consumed by something beyond the gray walls of his confinement. The inmate was a coiled spring of intellect, a dangerous mind now turned to a dangerous, albeit hopeful, purpose. "Any breaches?" the warden asked, his gaze fixed on the split screens displaying Elias's every move. The security officer beside him, a stoic man named Miller, shook his head. "None, sir. Thorne's protocol is watertight. Dr. Thorne adheres to all directives." They're both focused, almost obsessively so. Warden Hayes grunted, a sound that could mean anything. He saw the subtle shift in Elias, the way his hands moved with precision over the equipment, the intensity in his eyes. It was still a prison, and Elias Thorne was still a convicted felon. But something was happening in that lab, something that transcended the bars and the barbed wire. A flicker of cautious optimism, a sensation he hadn't felt in years, stirred within the warden. He just hoped it wasn't misplaced. One lost plant, a world on the brink. Can Elias remember the impossible? The initial success of the Astrix solanum extract was a fleeting victory. Days later, working into the deep night, Elias and Dr. Thorne hit a wall. The extract, while inhibitory, wasn't potent enough. It caused severe side effects, a toxic trade-off. Scattered papers and tired faces reflected their shared frustration. Elias stared at a complex molecular diagram of Acheron, then back at his worn botanical texts. His mind raced, pulling at threads of ancient knowledge, forgotten connections. "It's a catalyst," he murmured, more to himself than to Aris. "The Culla solanum is only part of it. It needs something to activate its full potential, to mitigate its own toxicity." He paused, his eyes glazing over as if seeing something far away. A symbiotic relationship. A rare botanical catalyst. Serpent's kiss. Dr. Thorne's shoulders slumped. "Serpent's kiss?" "Elias. That plant is believed to be extinct, or at best, incredibly rare. Only found in a few highly specific remote ecosystems. We've cataloged every known species. It's not in our database." Her voice was heavy with despair. Another impossible obstacle. The world was on the brink, and the key lay with a phantom plant, known only to a man whose freedom was a distant memory. Break out for a cure? The prisoner's impossible demand. The next morning, the air in Warden Hayes' office was thick with tension. Dr. Thorne, her face etched with exhaustion and desperation, laid out the new problem. "Warden, we need Serpent's kiss. Elias is the only one who can identify it in the wild. His knowledge is intuitive, almost photographic. We need a field trip." Warden Hayes' face turned a mottled red. "Absolutely not. Are you insane, Dr. Thorne? A prisoner, Elias Thorne, outside these walls? It's an unprecedented security risk. The headlines alone, the legal ramifications." He slammed his fist on the desk. "Impossible!" Elias, calm amidst the storm, stepped forward. "Warden, the coordinates for its probable habitat are remote. A small, heavily armed escort, GPS tracking. A tight perimeter. I can identify it quickly. A few hours at most. The alternative is global catastrophe. My expertise, my unique understanding of these plants, is our last hope. I will not attempt escape. My life sentence is already set. But if this antidote fails because of bureaucratic fear, how will you sleep?" His gaze was unflinching, confident. He wasn't asking. He was presenting an inescapable truth. The toxicologist's secret garden, a childhood lost, asterisk. The prison lab, usually a hive of quiet, focused activity, was still in the late hours. Elias Thorne, left alone under the watchful eyes of hidden cameras, moved with practiced stealth. From a loose panel beneath a workbench, he retrieved a thin, leather-bound notebook. Its pages, brittle with age, were filled not with chemical formulas, but with exquisite, hand-drawn botanical illustrations. Each leaf, each petal, rendered with a precision that spoke of profound love. As his fingers traced the familiar lines, a flicker of memory, soft as moss, bloomed in his mind. A young Elias, barely 8, in a sun-dappled forest, his grandfather's gnarled hand pointing to a vibrant fern. "Every plant, Elias," his grandfather would say, "holds a secret, life or death. It's all in the knowing." His gaze settled on a particularly intricate drawing. A delicate, almost ethereal flower, its petals like unfurling emeralds, a serpent's head at its base. All Yoref. The antithesis and the cure. The memory dissolved, leaving a melancholic ache. The scientist and the criminal, finding common ground in a world of secrets. Asterisk. The next morning, the lab felt less like a cage. Dr. Aris Thorne, catching a glimpse of Elias's notebook, its pages still open to a particularly complex plant structure, paused. "Those drawings," she said, her voice softer than usual. "They're incredible. Where did you learn all this?" Elias hesitated, a rare vulnerability in his usually guarded eyes. "My grandfather," he began, the words tasting strange on his tongue. "He was a botanist, taught me everything, saw beauty in the smallest weed, danger in the prettiest flower. He spoke of forests, of long days spent identifying, categorizing, learning the silent language of the earth. It was pure once," he finished, his voice tinged with regret. "Before I twisted it." Aris met his gaze. "My passion," she confessed, "came from a different kind of wound. A sister lost to a rare disease that no one understood. I vowed then to understand the unseen threats, to find the unseen cures. A fragile bridge formed between them, built on shared purpose and personal pain, the most dangerous field trip ever assembled. A prisoner's quest for a cure." Asterix. Warden Hayes' office felt colder than usual, despite the mid-morning sun. He stood, hands clasped behind his back, facing Elias and Dr. Thorne. "The request," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, "has been approved. A highly controlled, short-duration field trip. Perimeter will be locked down. Satellite surveillance, ground-penetrating radar, K-9 units, 24 armed guards, and a GPS tracker surgically implanted into Mr. Thorne." His eyes, hard as flint, met Elias's. "Any deviation, any attempt to exploit this opportunity, and the mission is aborted, permanently." Dr. Thorne let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, relief warring with the grim reality of the security details. Elias simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the immense risk and the even greater stakes. He knew the terms. He understood the price of this impossible, terrifying chance. "The map to salvation is hidden in the wild." Asterisk. The prison's briefing room hummed with a tense, professional energy. A grizzled security team lead, Captain Ramirez, pointed to topographical maps projected onto a large screen. "Our target area, Sector Gamma, deep within the Blackwood Preserve. Remote, rugged terrain, known for its challenging flora and fauna. We're talking steep inclines, dense undergrowth, unstable ground." He listed potential threats. "Wild animals, treacherous footing, the elements. Our priority is Mr. Thorne's security and the retrieval of the plant. No heroics, no deviations." Elias, studying the map, interrupted. "The Serpent's kiss will only grow on north-facing slopes, at an altitude of no less than 2,000 feet, within 50 feet of a perennial water source, and only where the soil pH is between 5.5 and 6.5. He pointed to a specific cluster of coordinates. "Focus your efforts here." Dr. Thorne looked at him, then at Ramirez. "His safety," she urged, "is paramount." Ramirez grunted, a grudging nod of understanding. The map to salvation, it seemed, was written in the wild, and only Elias could read it. Soundproc, the prisoner walks free, for a moment. Asterisk. Early morning. The air outside the prison gates was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant pine, a perfume Elias hadn't breathed in years. A black armored Mercedes-Benz S-Class, flanked by 2 formidable SUVs, idled silently. Elias, stripped of his prison uniform and dressed in a simple anonymous civilian jumpsuit, was escorted by a phalanx of guards. As the massive iron gates groaned open, revealing the world beyond the concrete, he paused. He closed his eyes, drawing in a deep, almost reverent breath. The sensation, so mundane for others, was an intoxicating rush for him. The chill on his skin, the sounds of birdsong, the vast open sky. It was a sensory overload, a moment of profound, terrifying freedom. Dr. Thorne, already seated in the Mercedes, offered him a small, reassuring glance. Warden Hayes stood at the gate, his face an unreadable mask, watching the convoy roll out. Elias was no longer just an inmate. He was a weapon, a key, and for this fleeting moment, a man with a purpose beyond despair. The journey into the unknown had begun. Deep in the forest, hours away from the sterile prison, the armored convoy finally rumbled to a halt. Overhead, the sky was a bruised canvas of gray, pressing down on a landscape Elias Thorne hadn't touched in years. Heavily armed guards fanned out, their movements crisp and practiced, but Elias seemed to glide through them, a man suddenly unbound. He wore a simple, dark jumpsuit, but his eyes, once weary, now sparkled with a primal alertness. He led the way, not with a map, but with a deep, almost forgotten instinct, reading the subtle shifts in the moss, the angle of the sunlight filtering through the dense canopy. Behind him, Dr. Aris Thorne stumbled, her polished hiking boots slipping on slick rocks, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She watched Elias, his movements fluid and purposeful, a stark contrast to her own lab-bound life. He was a different creature here, a part of the wild, not just observing it. "This way," he murmured, his voice low, almost a whisper against the rustle of leaves. "The air changes here." His words were an instruction, a promise, and a subtle command all at once. The air grew heavy, damp with the scent of rich earth and decaying leaves. Elias stopped abruptly, his head cocked, listening to something only he could hear, his gaze fixed on a cluster of ancient gnarled roots that clawed at the side of a moss-covered boulder. Slowly, reverently, he pointed. Nestled deep within a hidden crevice, shielded by hanging ferns, was a single, ethereal plant. Its broad, dark green leaves were veined with an iridescent silver, and from its center, a delicate, bell-shaped flower pulsed with a faint, otherworldly luminescence. The Serpent's kiss. Dr. Thorne gasped, her exhaustion forgotten, her eyes wide with awe. It was more beautiful, more profound than any image in Elias's worn notebook. "This is it," Elias breathed, his voice hushed. "It thrives in shadow, absorbing the unique minerals of this soil. Its root system contains the catalyst we need. A complex polysaccharide that acts as a molecular key, unlocking Acheron's tight grip on neural pathways." He approached it with gentle hands, a toxicologist revering his subject, not as a weapon, but as a miracle. As Elias knelt, carefully extracting the delicate plant, a sudden, guttural snort ripped through the quiet. A wild boar, huge and bristling with rage, burst from the undergrowth, charging directly towards Dr. Thorne, who froze, a scream catching in her throat. Without a moment's hesitation, Elias reacted. "Back! Get behind me!" he barked, his voice sharp with command. He didn't reach for a weapon, but instead snatched a handful of pungent, crushed leaves from a nearby bush, flinging them towards the animal's snout. The boar recoiled, snorting in confusion, its keen sense of smell overwhelmed by the acrid burst. It hesitated, then, disoriented, veered sharply and crashed back into the forest. The security team, who had been scrambling to respond, stared, impressed by Elias's swift, instinctual action. Dr. Thorne, trembling but unharmed, looked at Elias, her eyes filled with a profound gratitude that transcended their professional dynamic. In that moment, her trust in him solidified, forged not in a lab, but in the untamed wild. The return journey was cloaked in the silent descent of dusk. Elias sat in the armored convoy, cradling the carefully preserved Serpent's kiss in its specialized container, a beacon of faint silver light against the fading landscape. He stared out the tinted window, watching the trees blur into abstract shapes, the brief taste of freedom a bittersweet memory. A strange mix of accomplishment and melancholy swirled within him. He had found what was needed, perhaps saved countless lives, but the road led back to the gray walls. "Elias," Dr. Thorne said softly from beside him, breaking the silence. "Thank you. Truly, what you did back there, you saved my life." Her voice was thick with sincerity. Elias merely nodded, a quiet acceptance of her gratitude. The prison walls, illuminated by harsh security lights, loomed larger with every passing minute, a stark reminder of his reality. But within him, something had shifted. A fragile yet undeniable sense of purpose had taken root. Back in the prison lab, deep into the night, the air crackled with renewed energy. Elias and Dr. Thorne worked in a silent, intense choreography, their hands moving with focused precision. The Serpent's kiss was meticulously processed, its precious compounds extracted, purified, and then carefully integrated into the complex Antidote formula. The lab, usually a place of clinical quiet, now hummed with the promise of imminent success, the low whir of centrifuges, and the gentle bubbling of chemical reactions providing a hopeful soundtrack. As a glowing vial containing the final, vital component was set aside, Elias and Dr. Thorne met each other's gaze. It was a look of shared triumph, a silent acknowledgement of their extraordinary, unlikely partnership, and the profound hope they had rekindled. The world was still in peril, but now a glimmer of salvation burned brighter than ever. The hum of the prison lab, usually a dull comfort, now felt like a frantic heartbeat. Elias Thorne, his face etched with exhaustion, was hunched over a microscope, his attention locked on a cellular sample. Dr. Aris Thorne stood nearby, her usually calm demeanor replaced by a rigid tension, her eyes glued to a holographic projection shimmering in the center of the room. It was a global map, once showing isolated pockets of sickness, now a terrifying crimson tide. Her tablet buzzed, vibrating with a new, urgent transmission. She tapped it open, her breath catching in her throat. "It's worse," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the silent, grim news reports flickering on a wall-mounted screen. "Acheron has mutated. It's accelerating, spreading faster, and it's more lethal." The map pulsed, red tendrils reaching across continents with horrifying speed. Elias looked up, his gaze drawn to the escalating death toll on the news ticker. The antidote, painstakingly crafted, now felt like a child's toy against a rapidly evolving beast. A cold dread settled in his stomach, quickly hardening into a fierce resolve. The weight of the world, once an abstract concept, pressed down on him with crushing reality. The air in Warden Hayes' office was thick with unaddressed tension. Dr. Thorne, her usual scientific precision now laced with a desperate urgency, leaned across the warden's formidable desk. "We have to bypass standard trial protocols, Warden," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Acheron isn't waiting for ethics committees. We need immediate human testing, or millions will die." Warden Hayes slammed a fist on his desk, the sound echoing in the confined space. "Absolutely not, Doctor. My responsibility is to the law, to procedure. We cannot condone human experimentation, especially not within these walls." His face was a mask of rigid refusal. The legal and ethical fallout would be catastrophic. Elias, who had been listening silently, surprised them both. "The catastrophic fallout, Warden," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "will be the decimation of the human population if we waste another moment. The greater good, in this instance, outweighs the risks of individual sacrifice." He met Dr. Thorne's pleading gaze, a silent promise passing between them. He knew what he had to do. Back in the sterile confines of the prison lab, Elias began to prepare. Dr. Thorne watched him, her hands trembling as she assembled the necessary equipment. "Elias, please," she begged, her voice thick with emotion. "There must be another way. This is too dangerous, too final." Elias turned, his face etched with a quiet, unwavering resolve. "My knowledge of toxicology is unparalleled, Dr. Thorne," he stated, his voice devoid of his usual cynicism. "If anyone can monitor the intricate dance of these compounds within the human body, it's me. This isn't just a test, it's a chance. A chance to atone for a past I can never undo." He looked at Warden Hayes, who watched from behind the reinforced glass, his expression deeply conflicted. The warden, witnessing Elias's profound transformation from bitter inmate to selfless hero, finally gave a slow, reluctant nod. It wasn't an easy decision, but the weight of humanity's survival now rested on the shoulders of a convicted poisoner. And the warden knew it. The medical bay was silent, save for the rhythmic beep of monitors and the strained breaths of those gathered. Elias lay on the pristine white cot, a stark contrast to his usual prison attire, now in a simple gown. A small, controlled dose of the mutated Acheron was administered, the syringe a chilling whisper of his past. Then, Dr. Thorne, her hands steady despite her internal turmoil, initiated the IV drip. The experimental antidote, a glowing vial of crimson liquid, began to flow into Elias's bloodstream. Every second was a lifetime. His muscles seized, a burning sensation coursing through his veins. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Report." Dr. Thorne urged, her eyes darting between Elias's contorted face and the rapidly changing vital signs on the monitors. Pain. Intense neurological spasms but neural pathways regenerating. Elias rasped, his voice strained but lucid, his mind still clinically observing the battle raging within his own body. The room held its breath, praying that the poisoner's sacrifice would not be in vain. Hours crawled by. Dawn's first tentative light filtered through a small, high window, painting the medical bay in hues of hopeful gray. Then, a miracle. Elias's vitals stabilized. The erratic spikes on the monitors smoothed into a steady rhythm. The Acheron toxins, once a virulent tide, receded, neutralized by the botanical marvel he had helped create. Elias stirred, weak but alive. Dr. Thorne let out a sob of pure relief, tears streaming down her face as she confirmed the antidote's efficacy. "It worked, Elias," she choked out, her voice thick with emotion. "It actually worked. You did it." Elias offered a weak but meaningful smile. "We did it, Doctor." Warden Hayes, who had stood vigil through the night, stepped forward, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. He looked at Elias, not as an inmate, but as a hero. A silent, profound acknowledgement of redemption passing between them. Humanity had a chance. From a sterile prison lab, now transformed into a bustling command center, Elias Thorne watched the world heal. Holographic projections flickered across massive screens, painting a global map that slowly, miraculously, drained from angry crimson to a calming green. News anchors from every continent, voices once strained with fear, now reported on the miracle, the Thorne antidote, saving lives one dose at a time. Elias, still in his drab prison uniform, sat before a console, his face illuminated by the glow of data. He was no longer just Elias Thorne, inmate 472. He was a lifeline. International medical teams, via secure video links, hung on his every word, his precise instructions on rare botanical interactions, his intuitive understanding of Acheron's lingering effects. He saw Dr. Aris Thorne across the room, beaming, fielding calls, a proud, almost maternal glow about her. A quiet pride settled in Elias's chest, a feeling he hadn't known in years. His past was a shadow, but his present was a beacon. The prison greenhouse became Elias's sanctuary. Sunlight, filtered through the glass roof, bathed the lush foliage in a soft, ethereal glow. Here, amidst the verdant life, Elias found a different kind of freedom. He moved with a quiet reverence, his calloused hands gently touching leaves, pruning, repotting. Each act of nurturing felt like an act of healing within himself. He reflected on the journey, the desperate plea, the dangerous expedition, the ultimate sacrifice that had saved countless lives. The ghost of Viridian still lingered, a phantom limb of regret, but it no longer consumed him. He had used his unique, once destructive knowledge for creation, for life. He was still behind bars, yes, but for the first time in a long time, the bars felt less like a cage and more like a boundary he had chosen to make meaningful. One afternoon, as Elias misted a particularly delicate fern, Warden Hayes entered the greenhouse. The warden's presence usually brought an air of stern formality, but today, his expression held a rare softness. "Thorne," he began, his voice gruff but genuine. What you've done, it's beyond anything this institution has ever seen." Elias turned, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. The warden continued, stepping closer. "The Department of Corrections, in conjunction with Dr. Thorne's foundation, wants to offer you a position, a permanent one. Head of a new botanical research and toxicology program right here, within these walls. For medical and agricultural purposes, of course." He extended a hand, not for a handshake, but gesturing to the thriving plants. "A chance to use your talents, ethically, for good. A new life, inside the one you already have." The offer, stark and unexpected, hung in the warm, humid air. Later that day, back in the lab, Dr. Aris Thorne presented her own vision, a counterpoint to the warden's offer. She unfurled holographic architectural renderings of a sleek, futuristic research institute. "Elias," she said, her voice fervent, "this is the Thorne Institute for Botanical Remediation, and I want you as its chief consultant. Remotely, of course, within the confines of your sentence, but your insights are irreplaceable. We face new threats every day. Forgotten botanical remedies, emerging toxins. Your mind is a library we cannot afford to lose." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with ambition. "This isn't just about a job, Elias. It's about building a legacy, shaping the future of global health. A profound impact, reaching far beyond these walls." Elias listened, his analytical mind weighing the vast implications of her audacious proposal. Deep in the silence of his cell that night, Elias Thorne sat, the weight of two extraordinary offers pressing on him. He considered the warden's proposal, a stable, contained purpose, a chance to cultivate life and knowledge within the familiar gray walls. Then, Dr. Thorne's vision, a global reach, a profound impact, a legacy that transcended his confinement, albeit from a distance. He paced, the small space a crucible for his thoughts. This wasn't just about choosing a job, it was about choosing his redemption, defining who Elias Thorne would be. Would he retreat into a meaningful, contained existence, or would he demand that his unique, hard-won brilliance serve the world on a grander scale? His past was a scar, but his future, for the first time, was a canvas. His choice would not be a compromise, but a declaration of his newfound self-worth. The prison lab, usually a cacophony of quiet hums and Elias's focused scribbling, was thick, with an expectant silence the next morning. Dr. Aris Thorne stood by the main console, her posture a blend of anticipation and profound weariness. Warden Hayes, arms crossed, leaned against the sterile white wall, his expression unreadable. Elias Thorne, however, walked with a new, quiet confidence. He carried a single, neatly folded document. "Warden." "Dr. Thorne," Elias began, his voice calm, measured. "I've considered your generous offers. Both have merit, but I believe there's a third path, one that serves everyone involved more effectively." He unfolded the paper, laying it flat on the console. Dr. Thorne leaned in, her eyes scanning the precise, elegant script. "I propose a hybrid model," Elias continued. "I will lead the prison's botanical research and toxicology program, as the warden suggested, but this program will also serve as a dedicated remote research arm for Dr. Thorne's new institute, a hub for forgotten botanical remedies, and a first response unit for emerging biothreats, all within these walls." He looked from Aris to Hayes. "To achieve this, I require specific resources, expanded greenhouse facilities, advanced analytical equipment, and a small, carefully selected team of inmate assistants trained under my supervision. This isn't just about my redemption, Dr. Thorne. It's about building a foundation for future defense. It acknowledges my confinement, but demands my expertise be fully utilized and respected, not merely borrowed." A beat of silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant clang of a cell door. Dr. Aris Thorne looked from the detailed proposal to Elias, a slow, impressed smile spreading across her face. It was the smile of a scientist recognizing pure, unadulterated genius, coupled with the warmth of genuine respect. "A hybrid model," she murmured, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "It's audacious, Elias, and brilliant." She extended her hand, her gaze firm. "You have a deal, Professor Thorne. Consider your terms accepted." Elias met her gaze, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his own lips as he shook her hand. A current of shared purpose, a silent acknowledgement of their extraordinary partnership, passed between them. Warden Hayes, who had witnessed countless transactions of power and desperation within these walls, now stepped forward. He looked at Elias, a rare, genuine smile softening his stern features. "Thorne," he said, his voice gruff but sincere, "I never thought I'd see the day, but you've earned it." He extended his own hand. "Welcome to your new foundation." The three-way handshake, a confluence of authority, innovation, and hard-won redemption, formalized an agreement that promised to reshape not just Elias's life, but the very definition of justice and opportunity. Months later, the expanded prison greenhouse buzzed with a different kind of life. Sunlight streamed through reinforced glass, illuminating rows of exotic, flourishing plants. The air, once stale, now carried the rich, earthy scent of growth. Elias Thorne, no longer just an inmate but a leader, moved among the verdant foliage. Dressed in a pristine white lab coat over his prison uniform, he lectured a small team of inmate assistants, their faces rapt with attention. He pointed to a complex molecular diagram on a holographic display, explaining the intricate dance of compounds in a newly discovered fungal strain. Remember, Elias's voice was clear, authoritative, yet patient. Every solution has a source, and every poison an antidote. We just have to be observant enough to find it. Dr. Aris Thorne visited frequently, no longer a desperate supplicant, but an equal collaborator. They would huddle over samples, discussing research proposals for her institute, treating the prison lab as a vital extension of her global network. Warden Hayes, on his rounds, often paused at the greenhouse entrance. He would watch Elias, now truly the professor of poisons, mentoring his team, his passion for botany rekindled and harnessed for good. A quiet sense of pride, a profound satisfaction in the transformation he had allowed, settled over the warden. The gray walls of the prison now held not just punishment, but purposeful innovation. Evening settled over the prison, painting Elias's cell in familiar shades of dim gray. But the cell itself felt different. It was still small, still confined, the bars still present, yet the suffocating weight had lifted. Elias sat at his desk, not with despair, but with a focused intensity. He wasn't just sketching new plant species. He was charting their interactions, writing detailed notes for a new research paper. His mind, once a prison of regret, was now a vibrant garden of ideas, constantly exploring, constantly creating. He looked down at the tiny sprout in the crack of the wall, the silent companion of his darkest days. It was no longer a fragile shoot, but a strong, vibrant green, reaching confidently for the meager light. It mirrored his own journey. The scars of his past remained, a permanent mark, but they no longer defined him. His gaze, once weary and haunted, was now filled with a quiet, enduring purpose. He was still Elias Thorne, the man who had committed a terrible crime, but he was also Elias Thorne, the man who had saved the world, who nurtured life, and who had finally, against all odds, reclaimed his own. True freedom, he realized, wasn't about the absence of bars. It was about the presence of purpose. Elias Thorne's story isn't just about a lucky break or a second chance. It's a powerful reminder that the person you are right now, in whatever circumstances you find yourself, is not the final chapter. Your hidden talents, your forgotten passions, the skills you think no one sees, even the ones you've used for ill, they have immense value. It was a single, desperate plea and a global crisis that changed Elias's life. But it was his encyclopedic knowledge, his courage to confront his past, and his confidence to demand his true worth that secured his future and the future of humanity. What hidden talent do you have that the world just hasn't seen yet? What would you have done if you were Elias, offered a chance at redemption in the face of a global threat? What poison are you holding the antidote for? If this story inspired you or made you think, please give this video a thumbs up. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an incredible journey. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their big break might be just one desperate call, one forgotten skill, or one moment of courage away. Thank you for listening.